So some people have been asking me about the Panasonic GH7. As some of you may know, I used to be a huge Panasonic fan back in the day. I started out my YouTube career with the Panasonic G7, and then I moved on to the Panasonic GH5, which is by far one of my favorite cameras, if not the favorite camera I've ever had. Like, even though it wasn't as good as my latest cameras, there was just something very magical about using the GH5. And I think that the thing is that every company that produces cameras, they have these little ways to improve their cameras to the point where they feel that their customers will be satisfied. While with GoPro, it's like a bunch of lazy surfers just putting in a lot of megapixels and, thinking that will solve everything. But Panasonic, they really focused on putting in good features, and they kept upgrading their older cameras for a really long time. And, with Sony and Canon, it's just not the same story. You can have a very expensive flagship, and then the next month, they'll release a much cheaper camera that will have more features, but that the more expensive camera will not get. So, before I get off topic here, Panasonic GH7. So when the GH6 came out, I was really impressed with it, but the autofocus, it wasn't good enough, so to speak. But it had a lot of nice bells and whistles, high refresh rates, it had high resolution. Even the low light performance was pretty decent, but it just, once you go Sony or Canon, in the autofocus area, you just can't go back to something less good. Like, I remember using my GH5 and I would shoot in manual focus, and what I would do is I would have my smartphone, off screen so you couldn't tell, and I would actually point at the screen where my face was, so it would focus on my face at all times, and I would do it a bunch of times throughout the videos. With a Sony camera, I don't have that problem. It will just keep me in focus. I can move forward, I can move backward, it will still keep me in focus. And it's very enjoyable, actually, when you're making a lot of content. So with the GH7, I haven't tested it, but from what I can tell, they've actually fixed the autofocus to the point where you don't have to worry about it. Like, I'm sure if you compare it with a Sony camera, the Sony camera will probably beat it because they are so many years ahead of Panasonic. But in terms of practicality, the GH7 seems to be delivering in the autofocus area. Where I think I was kind of disappointed is that it didn't really have too many features. It didn't have any high refresh rates. It was basically a G9 Mark II. It was basically like the GH6 when it comes to resolutions and frame rates. Like, I'm still sort of waiting for a really good camera with 4K, 240 frames per second, or 1080p in 480 frames per second, something like that. But so far, zip. Like, it seems like we've reached this sort of line where camera brands just seem to feel comfortable, they just focus more on very tiny details. Maybe it would just demand too much from cameras if you wanted to shoot in 4K, 240 frames per second. I don't know. But I really thought that the GH7 would have something like that, something that would make even me want to go and get it. But personally, I'm just not interested in that. In fact, I'm selling all my cameras at some point, even my current one, the Sony ZV-E1, and my A7C, but I'm going to make a separate video about that. But when it comes to the GH7, I don't know. I'm sure it's a fantastic camera, and I'm sure it will make whoever buys it very happy. I'm sure there are some quirks, but I'm also sure that Panasonic, looking at their track record, they will fix whatever issues are in the cameras, because they have done so in the past. Like, I can't believe how much they upgraded the firmware on the GH5, for example. They just kept upgrading it, putting more and more features into it, and it was You know, Panasonic is really one of a kind company. Most companies don't do that, not the Panasonic way. And so, I'm still going to be watching and observing reactions to the GH7, see how people use it, how they like it. I'm personally just not interested in getting it. I think, like I said, it's a great camera. Most people will probably be happy with it. Although there is also the terms of physical limitations. The sensor is still a micro four thirds sensor. So if you're expecting low light performance like the Sony A7S III or the ZV-E1, it's just never ever gonna perform at that level. It's just not physically possible, But yeah, I think that for most use cases, Panasonic is probably like really enjoyable to use. Like, honestly, whenever I pick up my old Panasonic cameras, and yes, I still do have them, I just get so impressed with the menu system. The menu system on Panasonic was just so logical and it was easy to use. With Sony cameras, like, technically the Sony ZV-E1 does have the upgraded menu system, but I just still think that the Sony, they just don't know how to make menus. They make it extremely complicated. It's very difficult to go from one mode to another. And, I've been rolling with the Sony ZV-E1 for about a year now, and I still get confused in the menu system. With Panasonic, there's never any confusion. It's just so simple and easy to use. So, like I said, Panasonic, great brand. The GH7, undoubtedly a great camera. It's just not for me. Just wanted to share some thoughts about the GH7. And yes, it's obviously true. I have not tested it. I'm just venting some thoughts about it. Okay, I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.